How are you going tonight? Very good. Is it coughing in the back? This is a song we're going to sing. And it says that God is real. He's real, is he? Amen. Amen.
All about time. You know, the Rolling Stones used to sing a song called "Time Is on My Side." Some of you may remember it. It's, time is on my side.
Yeah!
Unfortunately, the reality is that most people who sing that song, who actually believe the words that time is on their side, who usually tripped out on acid. And unfortunately for them, the reality of time caught up with them very quickly. And for many of them, sadly, time has left them a long time ago. And tonight we're talking about time. And we're going to take up the offering in just a second. And while we're taking up the offering, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about time. But as the bags come down the aisles and across the rows, if you could just pass it on to your visitor here. And before that happens, I'm just going to pray for the offering. All right? So let's pray. Father, you've given us many things. And one of the most precious things you've given us, Lord, is time. And for all the gifts that are given tonight, we give them back to you because you gave them to us in the first place. So we ask that you take them, you multiply them, and you bless them. And bless those, Lord, truly bless them. Truly bless them, Lord, those that give. In Jesus' name. Amen. So while it's happening, we're just going to talk about time because one of the songs that's going to be sung in a moment is called Living on the Edge of Time. And what does that mean for some people? For some, it means perhaps a little anxiety, that there's a lot of pressure that they're under, that something that is about to happen for them or something that needs to happen. For others, it means basically time is short. So that's what we're going to do in a moment, sing that song. Well, the team's going to sing it for us. We also have a couple of announcements. After the service, you're all invited to join us for a cup of tea and or a cup of coffee and a biscuit. And we'd love to see you there and meet with you and talk with you afterwards. Also, the World Vision Famine, which is an annual event, is coming up soon. And if you'd like to participate in that, if you'd see Pat Tia afterwards, and she can organise packages for you.
this time, eh? And we can relax and I can get that tack fixed up. Come on!
How much was that last month?
Okay, I'm at garage tour. 2-day job, max. Look.
2-day job at top. Yeah, the carpenter did it last week.
What? Come on, I said we get to holidays, I do it, okay?
And Easter's coming.
Okay, and what do I do for a holiday then, eh?
I'd like to go to Australia.
Australia? There's far too many Aussies there. What are you thinking of? Dare I ask, and what's the kids' idea for a holiday?
The kids. Tom's off with his girlfriend. And Bridget left home.
Yes! No! What's this? She's in time? How come I'm always the last to hear these things? What's happening in this family?
Well, actually, I just had to get her attention. And now that I have her attention, she's really upset about you not going to that play last month, you know. You really should spend more time with the kids.
I'm not going to live this down anyway. Almost one play, 20 years later, I was still here this one. Look, if you must know, we spent time 7 days. She came in here, I gave her $5. She said thanks, you know.
Quality time.
Hey, come on. I spend more time with this kid than any other father, and that's a fact. Come on.
All the time with Father Christmas.
That's what blood of God, isn't it?
No.
It was too intense. Okay. I can see you. I agree, I've been a bit of a jerk lately.
I've noticed.
Thanks. What's a, I don't know. Leave the washing and go for a walk and talk about it.
Really?
Yeah. Why not?
Okay.
Hi. It's been great so far. Awesome. I have 2 readings for tonight. The first one is from Ecclesiastes, chapter 8, verse 6, which reads, "For there is a proper time and procedure for every matter, though a man's misery weighs heavily upon him." And the second scripture is Ephesians, chapter 5, verse 16. Make the best of your time. I think everything so far is pointed that way. So catch you later.
Tick tock, eh? Time is passing by, and for every one of us it's true, isn't it? You know, it's funny, but people have a fascination with time. Have you ever noticed it? Everywhere you go, there's people doing this. Just got to see it. Just got to see it. Got to check up that it's still there. Somehow, that we have this fascination with time. But you know there are times when it changes. Jonia was sitting at home absolutely exhausted. And Ted came home and he said, "Where's my pink shirt? What's for tea?" Jania's sitting there feeling depressed and sad and sort of just grins. A guilty kind of grin. And she said, "Oh, And he says, "What have you been doing all day?" She just sits there there feeling terrible. He didn't know. She was trying to tell him he didn't want to know, he didn't want to hear, he didn't want to see. Her time had been destroyed. Years ago, during the Second World War, there was a man flying an aircraft, a pilot, and he had a number of people on this bombing aircraft, and as he flew across German territory, they managed to score a hit with some flak. And the plane burst into flames. And the man said to his bombers and his co-pilot and the rest of the crew, he said to them, "Go, jump, get your parachutes and jump." So they all jumped and disappeared into the black night. And he turned around to pick up his parachute, only to discover that the source of the flames was his chute. And so he walked to the edge of the plane thinking, well, I'd rather die hitting the ground that I can't see at night than die in flames. So he jumped from this plane at about thousands of feet up. And an amazing thing happened. As he drifted down, he said, "God help me." And time just seems to be taking this incredible eternity for him. It was going in a rush, but it just seemed to be coming so slowly, all at the same time. And an amazing thing happened to this guy as he plummeted to the earth. He happened to fall out of the plane over the side of a mountain, a steep mountain. And he came into some fir trees. And the fir trees broke his fall, and as he bashed his way through the fir trees, he finally came to the bottom of the fir tree, and there was this huge pile of soft white snow, and he landed in that, and he lay there in agony. Couldn't believe he was alive. He lay there in agony, and his leg was hurting like crazy. Eventually the Germans came and picked him up. And out of that fall, he had one broken leg and a few bruises. An amazing story of survival. That man at that point decided that he had wasted his time. He needed to use his time differently. But you know, when you think about it, if it hadn't have been for the fir trees and the snowdrift, he wouldn't have even had the opportunity to think about time. You know, it's funny to watch sometimes. Well, not really funny, but stupid English saying again, but strange to watch. People in difficult circumstances and how they want time to last. You can read the Reader's Digest stories, and many of the Reader's Digest stories are ones where what happened, people would be trapped down a shaft or in a cave, or they'd fallen out of something, they're hanging off some place, or they're washed down a river, whatever it is, and in the middle of the story you find this little statement that they or a parent or somebody prayed for them. You know, I always remember vividly one of the stories because of my own respect for electricity, where there was a storm and the wires came loose and they broke, and there were 66,000 volt wires, and they dropped to the ground, and the effect was, because the ground was slightly moist, that the land became electric, if we could use that term in this situation. For some reason, it didn't earth out well, and it didn't blow the fuses, and these wires were snaking across the ground. And it was and the people went out of their house to get away from the thing, not realising the ground was electric. And the first thing that happened, as soon as they touched the ground, their bodies all writhing all over the ground. You know, in the middle of the story it says, the wife in the house prayed. And something happened, and miraculously, he survived. Miraculous story. That particular story amazed me. The hole in the mine story, there's several of these, but the latest one had a hole in the mine. What happened? Somebody prays somewhere. Again, what are they doing? What are people trying to do? You know what they're doing? Really, if you want to put it in simple, candid terms, they're asking for more time. That's all it is. They're asking, yes, we could say they're asking to be rescued, that's not really the important thing. The real important thing they're asking for is more time. I have a quotation that I found in a book, and it's written by a nameless person, anonymous. Time, the most precious of all possessions, is commonly the least prized. It is like health, regretted when gone, but rarely improved when present. We know it is irrevocable, yet throw it wantonly away. We know it is fleet, yet fail to catch the current moment. Fleet means to be quick, it's come and gone. It is the space of life, and while we never properly occupy its limits, we nevertheless murmur at their narrowness. It is a field of exertion, and while we continually leave it fallow, or in other words, we plough it but we don't plant, we yet sorrow over our stinted harvest. So many people, I have heard people here, I have heard people everywhere I've lived, who have complained about the fact that they didn't use their time well. Have you done it? We've all done it, probably, at different times. We all know we don't need to throw it away. In fact, there's an old story that says that talks about the guy who was sitting in the train and he threw his clock after looking at it. He threw his clock out the window, he shook his clock like this, and the guy was watching him, he shook his clock, and then he pulled the window down, he threw his clock out the window. And the guy sitting beside him said, what are you trying to do? And he says, look, I'm just trying to make time fly. It's a railway joke because the trains go so slow. Okay. There are two causes. As you can see, I was desperate for jokes for this time one. There are two causes of problems with time. The two causes are these. The first one is a poor use of time, and the second one is a use of time is poor. Now it sounds like they're the same thing, but they're actually not. You see, the poor use of time is the person who could be a driven person or a lazy person. There'll be people of both ilks here. You know, it's interesting, when you read time books about time management or rest of it, you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to teach people who are driven people to get their time organised. The trouble is, half our world's full of people who are not driven people. Right? Driven people are always busy. They're always people who are looking for results. They're also busy, but they're lacking in regard for integrity, and they struggle with an undeveloped tendency towards their skills with other people. They're always saying to the boss, the husband or the wife, etc., sorry, but they obviously never really mean it. But in their own mind, well, they think they're sorry, but they always, and this is an interesting thing, they always, because I know what it feels like, I've been there, feel guilty about the way they use it. Times like that. But you get the lazy person, the lazy don't care person, who does the opposite, of course. It's a person who lacks motivation, a person who's not willing to touch on their time, a person who's not willing to... Well, you might go not because things had to go out. Little one's a bit scared. She knows you. Gotta make it. Lazy don't care people. The people who just, at the end of the day, say, well, I didn't do a thing, but I felt like I'd done something, or I was trying to do something, but I didn't seem to have any time to do it. Well, it's kind of a confusing world for the lazy, don't care person, and there are people trapped in between. We need to look at the relationship between time and the whole of our lives, not just parts. It's not just time management I want to talk about tonight, because we spoke about that last week. Anybody, if they really put their mind to it, can manage time. But it's not just managing time, but how we use it that's important. You see, I can manage my time, but one of the things I could organise into my time slot I could organise something that I shouldn't be doing. And I could manage it well, but end up a failure. When we were on holiday, I had something happen. That first of all, I got the sweats. I got really sweaty. Because I was out in this inflatable boat, and there'd just been on the news a story about these warehouse inflatable boats, and some people getting blown out to sea in them, you see. And I'm on my inflatable boat, and I'm trying to catch fish, and something big got on my line, and it hauled the rod, whipped it out of my knees. And I had my oars in my hands, you see. I'd been sitting there just rowing gently so that the line would just sit loose in the water and it wouldn't drag along the bottom. I've been sitting there just rowing. I let go of my oars and I dived for my rod. Now my oars had been tied on. I had done that. I dived for the rod and I get it and I thought, good grief, I don't want no fish this size in my boat. Whatever it was, had taken my line very fast. And so I was doing a bit of a panic, you know. I was in this little inflatable and it wasn't very big, and I could just imagine me hauling some big fish into my boat and I'd be climbing out instead of staying in. And just at that moment I suddenly realised that one of the oars had slipped the rope that I'd tied it to, and it had gone out and it was bobbing away in the water. My oars have this little aluminium bottom on them, and so they were bobbing, it was bobbing in the water away from me, quite a distance. I only had one oar and I had an offshore wind. And I got the sweats immediately. I mean, you can imagine it, you know. I got this one on, I pulled it, and then I just, as I was going, I thought, oh man, I've got to control this. I panicked. It's a strong thing to do. I got back to the oar and I grabbed hold of it, retrieved it, sat in the boat. You wouldn't believe it. Within 5 minutes, I lost that stupid oar again. And the same episode, you know. Well, it came to time to go back. I decided that fishing wasn't a good idea if I was going to catch big fish in that little inflatable. And so what I did is I thought I had to go back. I got the oars. I started rowing. I was watching the end of the Tolaga Bay Wharf out that way. And I was watching it, and then I realised I was turning my head. I was going, no, I'm going to have to row faster. And I started rowing faster. I thought, no, this is stupid. I've got to control my rowing. Stop, slow down, brain. Because I knew jolly well if I panicked and I rowed fast, I was going to go slower than if I controlled my rowing. And so I sat there in the end. I sat there in the boat, in the water, and the stupid thing didn't have a high enough seat, and I was sitting down at the bottom trying to row. My arms were rubbing. I was going. I thought, there's the island over there. If I get blown out to sea, I'll go for the island, you know. And I just got into a steady rhythm, and then I noticed the slow, steady rhythm took me to shore, headwind and all. No worries. See, I conserved my energy, used my time wisely. And you know, sometimes we don't do that. We go flapping around and flipping around, trying to do all sorts of things. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I've done it. And the reason that I was able to bring control while I was in that boat was because I was able to come in touch with a peace in here that wasn't really worried about what was going to happen. We have inside us a private world. We're the only ones, apart from God, that know every detail of that private world. Isn't that true? We're the only ones. So I want to say that who I am is more important than what I do. I could be the greatest preacher in the world if it ever happened. But if I didn't have integrity and I didn't have an inner peace with God myself, it would be pointless. It would be absolutely pointless. And some of you know the Jimmy Bakker stories and the other ones. Horrific stories of people who should have had an inner peace, but never had it. I need to understand, if I have that inner peace, my own limits, because I can't have peace if I'm working beyond my limits or I'm working well below my limits. If I'm not functioning the way I'm designed to work, then I'm going to end up damaging myself. I need to be wise in the way I use my time. You can be sure of whether you're using time wisely by answering this question about yourself. If I was told today that I had 3 months to live, or if I was told today that I had 1 week to live, or maybe if I was told today I had 3 hours to live, what would I do with that time? What would I do with that time? Would it make a major difference? Would I feel frantic in the need to try and do things I hadn't done? And if I would, then I haven't been using my time well. You know the story about the 3 people? There's a man and a woman and another guy. Used to be the Irish, the Englishman, and Scotsman and the Irishman, but we'll avoid those kinds of biases tonight. And they'd come through crime to facing the death penalty. The first guy laid there, and he was a Frenchman well adapted to the guillotine, because that's where it came from. He's laying there, and the executioner said, "Pull!" And there was this clunk, and he braced himself for the shock. And there was a shoot. And he laid there and he thought, "I can't believe this." And turned around and looked up. He was a guillotine blade stuck halfway out. And so the governor of the prison says, "Well, under these circumstances, you have a reprieve. You no longer have to face the death penalty. You're released, my friend." So the Frenchman gets up and he's rather happy. Well, the English woman came along. She put her head down on the guillotine, got it all ready, nice and shape, trying to look beautiful. And she lays here and the executioner says, "Release!" And the guy releases a handle and this, still there. She looks up and here's the guillotine blade stuck halfway out. She thought, "Oh God, thank you," because she had prayed. "God, help me." Well, the third man, he gets down and he sticks his head down the guillotine, and he's a problem solver, this guy, laying there with his head in. And the executioner's standing there, he says, "You ready?" He says, and the guy, the third guy says, "Hey, hold on, I can see the problem! I can see where it's jamming!" You see, he didn't use his time well, did he? It would have been better to have prayed. You see, life is filled with all sorts of trade-offs that we have. We will say, "I can't do this because I want to do this. I'm going to do this and I'm not going to be able to do that." Or whatever it happens to be. Life is filled with trade-offs. You know, the condition your inner world is in, the condition you are in inside you, will determine what your responses will be. In Ecclesiastes 8:6, which Craig read before, it talks about there being a proper time and a procedure for everything. And the effect of misery on us, the writer of the Proverbs says, is it will weigh us down. And misery only comes through the poor use of time. Misery only comes through the poor use of time. Now people might say, "Well, I did this and I didn't deserve it." That may be true. It's still a poor use of time. I could allow the things that have lived in my life to pervade the whole of my life and to destroy me. But when it comes to balancing time demands in our lives, one problem we all have lies within it, with us. And it's not the environment, it's not the culture we belong to, it's not our family background, it's none of those things. I've seen many people, and sociologists and psychologists and psychiatrists turn around and they say, "Your problem is because of your childhood." Oh, well, that could be true to a degree, but it is not the truth. The truth is that every one of us are rebels at heart. Every one of us. And our rebellion means that we don't use our time well. I could very easily sit and ponder about the things that went wrong in my childhood. The fact that my parents moved too often for me to have a good education. I could sit and ponder about those things and become terribly depressed. And I would never have come as far as I have in life. I could have let that destroy me, but I had a choice. To be a rebel and to buy into that stuff. And some of it was my own problem, I created it myself. Or to choose not to. See, in making the best of your time, it's not what you do, it's who you are. That's what time is all about. So in reflecting on that, I want to speak about time and thinking. What do we do in relation to the mind and time? A common saying is this: give me time to think. And yet, so often it seems to have flown away. Time has flown from us. We need never ever to say that time is something we haven't got, because we have. If we don't think we've got enough time for everything, we need to stop and think about what we're doing in our lives. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, people. Time's ticking away. The chorus of that song. I often find, and I've noticed that people find this difficult, I often find my best moments of inspiration are when I sit down and I start to think. I have created some of the best inventions I've had when I've been thinking. I go to bed, and instead of trying to count sheep, which I think is totally unproductive, it may be a Kiwi thing to do, instead of trying to count sheep, what I do is I start inventing things, even when I go to sleep. Or I think about some creative thing I can do in the church which will do something special. We had some visitors here this morning who said to me after the service they were intrigued with some of the stuff we have around here. And he said, he knew me a little bit, and he says, you obviously have spent some time making some electronic devices, and that's been really helpful to your ministry in the church. That's the way he felt about it. And I sat there and I said, yeah, it's good. It meant that we just had to sit down and think for a wee while and then get somebody else to do some of the work. If we think and we spend some time considering carefully before God the things that we're doing in our lives, can I say this? We will find that that is the greatest time saver we could ever have. It's true. A woodsman never ever loses time when he sits down to sharpen his axe. You know the story about the guy who went into, as a woodsman, he went into the shop and he wanted to cut his trees down faster, and he heard the story about this new machine that had come out. And he went into the shop owner and he says, I hear you got these things called a chainsaw. And I want one of these things because some of my friends who are woodsmen have been cutting their trees down far faster than I have been. He was worried about the time loss he was getting against his friends. They were earning bigger wages with their chainsaws. So the salesman sold him this wonderful McCulloch chainsaw, which of course is better than the other one, of course. And so the woodsman grabs hold of this thing and he goes to the bush, and several days later he comes back out of the bush and he said to the guy, he said to the salesman, this thing's terrible. And the guy said, why is that? He says, well, I'm spending heaps more time cutting down trees than I did with my axe. And he said, well, what's happened? He said, how many trees are you cutting down? He says, I'm only getting about 17 a day. And he said, with my axe I could knock down just about 50 a day. So the salesman was a bit puzzled about this, so he says to the woodsman, look, you better go back. And he said, what you got to do, when you cut that tree down with a chainsaw, it's different. He said, you don't just cut little notches out, you've got to cut big pieces out, and then the tree will come down quicker. So the woodsman goes off back into the bush again, and a few days later he comes back to the salesman again. He says, it's still no good, I'm only managing to get 27 trees a day. So the guy said to him, what are you doing wrong? He says, I know nothing wrong. I did exactly what you said. I'm cutting big chunks out of the tree, and they fall down, and they're falling down all right, but it takes a long time and a lot of sweat. I was better off with my axe. I want my axe back. So the salesman said, look, jump in my pickup, we'll go out and have a look, see what you're doing. Because I'm sure you should be cutting down twice as many as with the chainsaw as with the axe. And so he gets out there and he checks over the chainsaw and he has a look and he says, no, it looks good, looks fine. Had a bit of work on it. I can see you've done a lot of work. You've got a strong grip there, man. I can see where you've been gripping the handles. And so in any case, he says, look, I'll just have a go with myself. So he bends down, he grabs the chainsaw, he puts his foot on it, he pulls the cord. And the woodsman's standing there. Look, Nick, what's that noise? He says. You see, he didn't understand that the object of the machine was to save time with the power of the engine and not just the power of his arms. I'm able to get to know myself when I spend time thinking, when I spend time making sure I'm sharp and I've got the power to live my life with freedom and I'm not being driven by other people. We reap what we sow when it comes to time. You know, another guillotine story was a man who was called Guillotine. In the French Revolution, he was a kind of bloodthirsty guy and they were doing all these nasty things, killing people. So Guillotine had this idea and he invented the guillotine, which was named after him. But an interesting thing happened. The French revolutionists said to him, you've got a nasty mind, my friend. A wicked, evil mind. And a man who developed a machine like this deserves to die. And so his was the first head that got whacked off on the guillotine. Now, I would say that was a poor use of his time, wouldn't you? What he sowed, he reaped in terms of the use of his time. And can I say that that's the case? If you spend lots of time sowing yourself with things that are not good and using your time for things that are not good, if you're watching pornography on television or you're doing things that are not good use of time for you, if you're spending far too much time playing sport and not giving time for your family, you will reap what you sow. Your children will rebel. There are all sorts of misuses of time that we can have, and we need to be aware of that. The last thing I'd like to cover tonight is the relationship between time and death and God. People have been fascinated not only with time, but with end times. You start talking about that even in the workplace. You raise it the right way and people will be wanting to talk about it. They want to struggle with the whole thing of end times. They want to know. We were talking in my cell group the other night and some of the people said, they confessed, that they had been along to some mediums to try and figure out what was going to happen in the future. They'd done it some time ago. One of our ladies had resisted the temptation. And we were there talking and I said to them, you know, that was a waste of time. Because the people who are doing it, they will give you some truth, yes, because Satan is powerful enough to do that, and that's who they're sourcing. But they'll give you some error, and that error is destructive. And it'll be a bad use of people's time. The end times not only relate to us in terms of what's going to happen in the future, but they relate to us when we die. I know during the holidays, Steve Brimmel came and phoned me from down Nelson Way. He said to me, Gary, you've got to pray for me. Hope he doesn't mind me sharing this story. He said, why are you phoning from Nelson to ask me to pray for you? I mean, this had to be serious. And he said something had happened. He said, He was coming back from Parachute production scene. And they were in a car smash. Somebody smashed their car up for them. And then a friend of theirs coming back, and she was in a car smash and she lost a finger. And then I know his mum was in a car smash. I think a truck crossed the road or something, wasn't it? Truck crossed the road and bladdered their car and went over a bank, you know. And she was in the hospital. This all happened within just a few days. And so Steve was driving down Nelson, and every time he saw cars coming the other way, he was singing, "Yo, what are they going to do? They're going to come across the road too," because all the other ones, the opposing person had come across the wrong side of the road, you know. And he was wondering whether his time might be up if he's not careful. So he rang me and he says, "Pray for me." I said, "Yeah, I'll pray for you now, bro." Well, we do have a concern about time. And sometimes we ignore that concern to our peril. I remember two men in Christchurch. We were in this coffee bar this night, and these two bikies, a friend of mine, Jim, and a friend of mine, Murray, we were together. And Jim actually turned to these two guys, and he said to these two guys, "You need to follow Jesus. You need to make a decision to do it tonight. This is your time." And I'll be honest with you, I sat there thinking, "Come on, Jim, you're getting a bit heavy on it, man." That's the way I felt. I felt Jim was really putting the acid on, and that's a bit, you know, a bit right. But in any case, he kept pressing home. He said, "I really feel God saying, you've got to make a decision tonight." And these guys, I always remember this, they said to us, they said, "Look, we've got time, we can think about it, we can, you know, we've got plenty of time. What you've shared with us is good, but we've got to go now." Well, a couple of minutes later, we're sitting in a coffee bar and we heard this. A block away from us. We walked down, and to a horror, these two guys had been going down Manchester Street. And a car went through a red light and hit them, and they were both dead. They thought they had time. You see, in God's eternity, in God's purpose, in God's way, we don't have time. Not in that sense. We only have that which He's allocated to us. That which we're going to have. It's finite. It finishes in this world. And we need to be aware of that. God doesn't live within our framework of time. God is beyond it. God is called light. "I am the light of the world." He constantly says that. And any of you that are scientists will understand that the relativity theory says, that relates to the whole thing of motion and time. The relativity theory says this: if I could live within the framework of the speed of light, which is a framework of time, which is different to our framework of time, if I could live within that framework, I could be here in China right now. But can I say to you, that the only way we're going to be able to live in that same framework of light with the time of God is if we're in relationship with Him, and we need to think about that. We need to spend time with God. We need to spend time asking ourselves. There's a guy called Thomas Kelly. He said this. He said, "Life is meant to be lived from a centre, a divine centre. God designed us to live from that centre." And somebody else said this, a little quote. He says, "Time is not an endless, inevitable circle where history repeats itself and the individual has no influence or control. Time is a line. It has a beginning and an end, and it moves in a particular direction. When we live our life, it is important to understand that we are not caught in some kind of cosmic, meaningless whirlpool where the events and circumstances that we all face each day are controlling our future and causing us to be the people we are. No, life is more like a river where God's involved in our life. That's what is clear. In Ephesians, the passage that Craig read before, it says, "Make the best of your time." Tonight I want to ask you, how well do you use your time? What do you do with it? Because God had an intention for us in the way we should use it. And I want to encourage each one of you to use it. I know tonight there's one or two visitors here with us, but in reality there's quite a few people that are not here that could have been. And I ask the question, how do we use our time? What are the things that we prioritise? What are the things that are most important to us? Is it eternity? Because that's what what should be. Because otherwise we're going to run out of the time we need to have. And some of you have recently discovered what it means to come into His eternity. I invite anybody that doesn't know that eternity tonight, I'd invite you to say to Jesus, Lord Jesus, I want you to live in my life, and I want to live your way, and I'm never going to go back and waste my time, or waste your time, God, because He's given it to us. So I'd love you to think about that tonight, and I want to lead us in a prayer, and if you would like to agree with that prayer, I want you to say amen when I say and all the people say it. I want you to say amen. I don't want you to just go, amen, mum. I want you to mean it. I want you to mean it from your heart. Because I believe that God is serious. When He gave us time, He wants us to live it, and live it to the full, and enjoy it to the full, and not to feel guilty or frustrated or empty at the end of the day. He wants us to know His time. Will you join me in the prayer? Father God, I'd ask right now that you might help us to realise where it is that you want us to tackle the issue of time. The things that we've been not doing, we've been living in rebellion to you because we haven't used the time the way that you'd love us to use it. Help us to be able to change that, Lord. To be able to allow you to work within us so that our inner self becomes really well balanced. That we come to really love you and to walk in freedom with you. And teach us what it is to know you every day and to spend time sharing with you. Lord, help us to put aside things that are not important or even destructive, that we might know what it is to know you in every part of our lives. In Jesus' name. And all the people said, Amen. And all the people said, Amen.